Competency 8. The ESL teacher understands the foundations of ESL education and types of ESL programs. The descriptors for this competency include knowing the historical, theoretical, and policy foundations of ESL education, knowing the type of programs, applying that knowledge to different types of programs to make instructional and programmatic decisions, and applying knowledge of research findings related to ESL education, including research on instruction and management practices to assist in planning and implementing effective ESL programs. One of the things about this competency that will be new to you is the historical perspective, most likely. So there's a handout in the binder or the materials called chronology of federal and state law and policy impacting language minority students. That has a kind of a summary of many of the cases that have impacted policy. I suggest that you look at that, but we're going to go over right now just a few of the more important ones. So make sure you take a look at that handout. So prior to World War I, U.S. schools were really tolerant towards the use of multiple languages. In fact, there were a lot of immigrants, and basically from the 20s, even through the 60s, it was more of an English-only sink or swim kind of policy. And a lot of people say, well, they learned English, but really, if you think about it, the system wasn't like it is today in terms of kids having to stay in school, and many kids didn't graduate high school at that time. They got enough knowledge to learn English, but they also got jobs in industry and maybe farming and different things where they didn't require a diploma. So it worked well for some students, but certainly not for all. So how has federal policy evolved? Well, in 1968, the Bilingual Education Act came out, and it has been amended multiple times. The most recent is 2015, and that is the ESSA law, and it stands for Every Student Shall Succeed. Prior to that, you may be familiar with the No Child Left Behind Act, and those are just reauthorization of the law that originally said that we need to provide a certain type of education for these students. One of the first court rulings was Lau versus Nichols. This was in San Francisco, 1974. Asian parents brought suit against these schools because they were claiming that an identical education does not constitute equal education. It's kind of the same situation today when we talk about equity and equality, not exactly the same. So if I put an EL and a not native speaker in the same class and do exactly the same things, it's not really equal, because the EL, or the English learner, LEP student, has the barrier of being a non-English speaker or a limited English speaker. After Lau versus Nichols, it was clarified a little bit further in Castaneda versus Pickard, and that was in 1981 in Texas. There was a Texas school that they felt was violating the Educational Opportunities, Equal Education Opportunities Act of '74, because they were using a language remediation program. So for all their students that needed these services, they were treating it like remediation rather than regular education. So the Court of Appeals formulated a set of standards to determine compliance. And they included that not only must you have a program, but you must pursue a program that's based on an educational theory that's recognized as sound. You also must implement the program, and that you must actually look at and make sure that the program is successful. And you can't keep persisting in a program that isn't producing results. So it really took Lau versus Nichols and said, not only must you have this program and it not be remediation, but you have to implement it and make sure it's working. Plyler versus Doe was important because in 1982, it established that states do not have the right to deny a free public education to an undocumented immigrant student or child. And in fact, they can't even ask about immigration status, okay? When we talk about ESL policy in the state of Texas, we are talking about the TEC Chapter 29 and the TAC Chapter 89. And those are in your materials as links. Chapter 29 is the Texas Education Code, and TAC Chapter 89 is the Texas Administrative Code. And that is what the commissioner adapts to give further guidance to the school districts on how to implement Chapter 29. Chapter 29 is the law and can only be changed by legislators, but Chapter 89 is something that the Commissioner of Education, with feedback from individuals in the field, can adapt. And we've just had that updated this past July. So there's a new copy of that for you there, but basically policy just says that if you have at least one LEP student or an English learner, you have to provide ESL services. The teacher doesn't have to speak the primary language, but you do have to teach the essential knowledge and skills, the text, and the English language proficiency standards, which are the ELPS. Okay, that is the requirement. And you also have a copy of the ELPS to refer to. There are certain program models that the state approves. We have two in ESL. We have a content-based program, and what that means is that the student receives all content, core content instruction by ESL certified teachers, okay? So that can look a little bit different depending on what grade they're in, whether they're in elementary, middle, and high school, but the gist of it is that all their core content, math, science, social studies, and language arts, are ESL certified. The other model is called pull-out, and even though it doesn't necessarily mean you literally pull out the child from the classroom, what it does mean is that the student receives their language arts from an ESL certified teacher, okay, through ESL. And that's the main difference. So that could be in a departmentalized situation where the language arts teacher is certified, but the math teacher is not certified. That would be pull out. So it's typically your departmentalized elementary and your middle and high schools that would fall into for pull out. Self-contained is a classroom where the teacher, who's ESL certified, teaches at the elementary, and she teaches all the subjects. So that situation, you could code content-based. In pull-out, as I just said, the student can be pulled out, or the student can be in the classroom and be serviced, and so forth. But this can also be a situation where it's really just that the language arts teacher is doing that, whether she pulls the student out, or the student stays in the classroom with the teacher. There's an ESL type class period. So that can be the ESL's teacher is ESL certified, and she's using sheltered strategies with the student, and they get credit. In these type of classes, it's usually more like an elective, especially at secondary. It's just a class to help support them. At elementary and the upper grade levels, we talked about departmentalized. You can have one or more ESL certified teacher. Sometimes one teacher teaches two subjects and the other teacher teaches the others. And so that can be an arrangement. We also have things called newcomer centers, or anything where we're really working with those recent immigrants. We're trying to pool our resources to focus instruction on those beginning students, beginning intermediate students. The students can only remain on that kind of center or arrangement for 2 years when they first enter the country. So we also have what we call sheltered instruction. Sheltered instruction, or even content-based ESL, is really a program or approach of using the academic subject being taught to actually teach English as well. So you're learning both the content and the language at the same time, which is really critical for our ELLs so that they don't fall behind. We don't have enough time to teach them English first and then catch up on the content, okay? So sheltered instruction is a common term used for using the strategies that work with these students. So you may hear it referred to as sheltered instruction as a program, like at the high school level, where certain teachers take smaller classes with beginners and intermediates and really focus on working with those students that need it in the content areas. You also may hear of second language strategies or second language acquisition strategies, and those can be used in any environment. So sometimes sheltered instruction is referred to as a program or a class, and sometimes it's really used generically to mean using techniques and strategies good for all ELs. Okay. So we talk about what would content-based look like. And then at the secondary level, at the content-based level, one of the features of this has language and content objectives. You know, the student will be able to blank whatever the content is, and then a language objective. Okay, and we'll talk a little more about that momentarily. Another strategy is using supplemental materials, scaffolding the instruction, having a lot of interaction. That's really critical for the students to get time to practice speaking and listening and reading and writing. Dual language is a program for bilingual education. It's a program that we offer in Texas. Some school districts choose to. We won't get into really bilingual programs because that's a lot of additional information. It's just important that you understand that dual language is a program for these students where they teach in both languages. Okay, there are different models, but we offer that in Texas. Program personnel, you can have ESL teachers, you can have regular teachers working with the students. You can have different certification options. Here's a link to the TEA website on certification. We will be updating information about certification because it is now moving from ETS to Pearson, and that's starting this September of 2018. Here are the practice questions that you will go over in your preparation manual. For Competency 8, it's question number 14, 17, and 24. Be sure to do the questions first and then check the answer and rationale for those answers. Thank you.